Alright, this right here is Arecibo. It was the biggest telescope ever built, and it was strategically picked to be in Puerto Rico because of its latitude. Now, just across the island is another observatory called Tibes. And this was built about 1400 years earlier by the Tiano. Now, what's interesting about this site is everything about it says Mesoamerica, like the Maya. It's got the ball court, the plazas, the burial grounds, the shamanic activities. Even a ceramic that's only found in Mesoamerica is also found at this site, Tibes. Another interesting thing about this site is that it has the largest amount of bodies ever discovered in the Caribbean. I think there was about almost 200 people buried here. So they did genetics testing. I'm assuming they figured they were going to be from Mesoamerica, but it turns out they came from the Amazon, the Orinoco Delta. So they were seafaring people. Probably one of the reasons why they were good at astronomy. Now, the Mesoamericans definitely had an influence on them. The Maya, and they were over here. Here's a site on the coast just like it. Here's the Chichen Itza Observatory. All right, let's go look at the observatory. Now, there was a archaeoastronomy study done at Tibes, and what they were looking for was markings of Venus, because the Mesoamericans tracked Venus, their god, whether it was Quetzalcoatl, Viracocha if they were down in Peru, but or Kukulkan. And they found that there were petroglyphs in the ball court that would align with Venus rising. And so they would be on these little stones here, like little emojis. And so this is where they would play the sport, the ball game. When Columbus did arrive and the Spaniards arrived, there was another site, and they did play this game. They continued to play this game. They still made the ball. So they did learn some stuff, but this was gone. This site, Tibes, wasn't here. It was gone for like hundreds of years before the Spaniards arrived. Now, what makes this site ideal for astronomy is that it's kind of like at the foothills of a mountain range. So they're up high, looking down at the ocean towards the ecliptic. So you're going to be able to observe the moon, the planets, and everything. But even more importantly, you'll be able to see the Southern Cross, something that is not that easy to do from the Northern Hemisphere. And then not to mention, they're also facing the land that they came from. Now another connection is over here in the United States. It's called the Miami Circle. It's another thing they just luckily discovered. They were building a condo. Sitting right on the edge of the water, and it's got Tiano artifacts. But the craziest part is that you can link the people of Puerto Rico all the way to Pumapunku or Tiwanaku. And this is like Bolivia, the Peruvians, over the Andes, way past the jungle. Zoom in. And the reason I say they're linked to these people is because the shamanic activities they were doing on Tibes involved this drug called cahoba. I never heard of it, but after looking into it, it turns out that cahoba is a DMT, and it's a very sophisticated hallucinogen. DMT is basically in everything, but your body has a defense mechanism that is the reason why you don't talk to your ancestors every time you have a salad. It kind of ignores the DMT, but if you mix something like seashells, the calcium will kind of distract the party pooper, and you can talk to your ancestors. But so here at Pumapunku is the only other place I found this cahoba. Well, no, it's also in Venezuela, where the Puerto Ricans originally came from. But the artifact, the actual tool, the snuff, it's the same exact thing, same exact plant, all the way over here. Now, what's interesting about being connected to the peoples on this side of South America, you see up here, that's where they went up to these islands, kind of island hopping. Now these are oceans, so it's not just like little canoe, easy. This is like, Bermuda Triangle territory. But anyways, what's interesting about being connected to people over here is that there is now evidence that connects the people of Chile, Peru, with these folks over here. Rapa Nui, Easter Island. Now, what's really cool about the people of Easter Island is that they were Polynesian. And you could kind of see if the ocean level was a little bit lower, you can kind of just island hop. There's Pumapunku. Look at that. Perfect line right to Rapa Nui. Which connects them to Papua New Guinea, Australia, Indonesia. Now, after the Spaniards came, we know that they introduced Europeans and Africans and that Puerto Ricans today are basically made up of European, Africans, and the indigenous. But they're already pretty much connected to two continents, North America and South America. Then you got Africa, then you got Europe, then you got Asia, when you get into Polynesia. And the ironic part is, one of the only peoples they're not connected to are the Indians. So Columbus, he died thinking that he did discover India. And on his final voyage, I believe he was in the Dominican Republic, there was an issue with his boat, and they had to fix the boat, and they didn't have enough food. And the natives at that island, they did not stockpile food because they just got their food when they needed it. So Columbus asked them for food, and they said, "No, we don't have extra food." So the story goes, Christopher Columbus knows that there's a blood moon coming, an eclipse, a lunar eclipse from the star charts. And he says, "Hey, my God's going to turn the blood moon, or the moon blood, if you don't give me food." And then that night happens, and then the moon turns red, right? But if he was actually in India, you wouldn't ever see it because it would be daytime. So that story never made sense to me. But it turns out that Columbus made two mistakes. One was that he thought he traveled a lot farther than he did. The amount that he calculated, it would have put him like past Texas. And the other one is he was using, I believe, Arabic miles instead of Greek miles for his calculations of the Earth. So he thought the Earth was a lot smaller than it actually was. But anyways, he claims he got the food because of his astronomy. Now, this is what interests me the most about Tibes. The Stella Plaza. Now, basically, it looks like a sun, except for it's not completely finished. This doesn't make sense because this site was inhabited for like almost 1,000 years. Definitely hundreds. So why wouldn't they finish the sun? Let me back out a little bit. In real life, it's much greener and much more prominent. But you can see right here, there is no triangles to the star or to the sun. And that's what got me thinking of a sundial. It's about 40 meters long because a sundial, the shadow wouldn't cast on this southern part. Right here is north, and the actual shape of the triangles. So what happens is the shadow starts to move slower as you get towards 12 o'clock. And it appears that they were able to calculate this because their triangles get much smaller as you get towards north. So I think this sundial, which is kind of like a pocket, it's like a utility knife, Swiss Army knife, because a sundial is also a compass, it's a calendar. But one thing that's never been established in history, there's no other record of this, is using a sundial as a game clock for the sport you're playing. Today, we all play sport. All the sports except for baseball use a clock. And so the shadow crossing one of these triangles would be about 2 hours, which would be the perfect amount of time for a sport. And I drafted up a sundial for Puerto Rico's latitude, something like 18 degrees north. Your latitude will have an effect on the actual size of your sundial. So the farther away from the equator, the larger your sundial, because you're going to have the difference of the long nights during the summer. But originally, I was looking for other sundials, like new ones, at the same latitude, and I couldn't find any. I was checking out cities that were at a similar level. Hey, is there a sundial here? Maybe like a little plaza sundial, something similar. But it turns out there was a sundial right next door. It's now been covered up. They destroyed it. But you can see the similarities. And you can see actually that the Tiano knew much more about astronomy than the person that built this one. Let me show you. All right, that's the sundial. North is facing up. Go to my secret sundial. Now, I did find images of this, and so the sundial was created to look just like the sun, with like the triangles kind of flaring out, but everything was equal distance, like a clock. But then the person that built it, once they started using it, realized they made a mistake and the sundial doesn't work that way. You only need about 3/4 of it, or 2/3, and that the spacings of the numbers, I think these are actually benches, but you could see that they added the spacing to the numbers afterwards because they were posing, basically. Sundial posers. And here's the crazy part. This is Epstein Island. It's the simulation, baby.